Brad's sightings. One popular theory claims that the narrator glimpses the real Brad Pitt in the airport before he ever meets Tyler Durden, and that this celebrity sighting seeds Tyler's appearance in his mind. Fans point to an early scene where the narrator rides a moving walkway and passes a man who looks a lot like Pitt, but does not match Tyler's later, loud wardrobe. The film also shows a marquee advertising 7 Years in Tibet, a real Brad Pitt movie, which implies that Pitt exists as a celebrity in this universe. The idea is that the narrator, soaked in pop culture, unconsciously models his ideal alter ego on that familiar face. Tyler later says, "I look like you wanna look," which lines up uncannily with this scenario. The movie never states that the airport man is Brad Pitt playing himself, and the subliminal flashes of Tyler can be read as the same hallucination we see later. That means this remains unconfirmed, but the visual clues give it just enough weight that it might actually be true. Marla Illusion. One of the most divisive theories argues that Marla Singer is not a separate person, but another fragment of the narrator's mind, representing his vulnerability and self-loathing. Supporters note that she mirrors his behavior at support groups, appears at emotionally charged moments, and often drifts in and out of scenes in ways that feel dreamlike. Some fans argue that other characters rarely address her directly without him, echoing how no one truly interacts with Tyler on his own. Visual moments like Marla casually walking through traffic or acting strangely detached when chaos erupts are treated as hints that she might not be bound by normal reality. At the same time, she has her own apartment, belongings, and actions that seem to affect the outside world, which supports the idea that she is real. The film never confirms her as imaginary, but the parallels between Marla and Tyler, plus the narrator's mental state, give this theory enough grounding that it could be true, while still not being proven. Tyler Conman. Another fan theory flips the twist completely and suggests that Tyler Durden is a real person who convinces the narrator that he is imaginary to dodge responsibility. Under this reading, a charismatic drifter meets the narrator on the plane and deliberately recruits him as a vulnerable partner. The narrator's insomnia, loneliness, and obsession with self-help make him easy to manipulate. As Project Mayhem grows, Tyler steadily pushes all dangerous actions onto the narrator's conscience, eventually convincing him that they are the same person. The reveal montage showing the narrator in Tyler's place could, in this theory, be an unreliable reconstruction rather than objective truth. The movie strongly presents the split personality explanation, but because everything is filtered through the narrator's mind, fans argue we cannot be 100% sure. There is no final objective viewpoint that proves Tyler never existed, which leaves just enough room for this darker possibility to hang in the air without being confirmed. Multiple Tylers. Some fans argue that Tyler Durden is less a single person and more a role that multiple members of Project Mayhem end up sharing. The idea is that Tyler becomes a contagious identity, a way of talking, dressing, and acting that spreads through the group until any member can embody him. The uniform shaved heads, matching clothes, and synchronized chanting blur individual differences and make it plausible that more than one man could be Tyler at different moments. Scenes where members repeat Tyler's phrases word for word or behave with his exact swagger add to the sense that his persona has been copied. The film never shows another character explicitly called Tyler or clearly stepping into that identity after the twist, so it does not prove the theory. But the way the group dissolves personal names and merges individuality into a single cause gives this idea enough thematic support that it might actually fit the world of the story, even though it remains unconfirmed. Marla Knowledge. A subtler theory suggests that Marla has figured out the narrator's split personality long before he does, and that she chooses to keep quiet about it. Supporters highlight her exhausted, wary reactions when he shifts abruptly between moods, as if she has seen these switches many times. When she calls him the craziest person she has ever met, fans read it as a literal assessment of someone who is not just moody, but deeply fractured. Her phone calls, sudden disappearances, and reluctance to engage when he is most chaotic can be seen as self-protection around a man she knows is dangerous. The film never gives her a clear, "I know you are Tyler" speech, and her dialogue can also be read as simple exasperation with an unstable partner. Still, her consistent discomfort with both the narrator and Tyler's extremes hints that she might understand more than he realizes, which keeps this theory alive as a plausible but unconfirmed reading that might actually be true. Paper Street. The theory that the Paper Street house is a hallucination draws on a real map-making trick and the uncanny nature of the house itself. In cartography, paper streets, or trap streets, are fake roads added to maps to catch plagiarists. Fans see Tyler's address on Paper Street as an intentional clue that the location may exist only on paper, or in the narrator's mind. The house appears suddenly after his condo explosion, in just the right place for him to retreat, and its decayed, almost surreal interior looks like a physical version of a collapsing psyche. Floors rot, water pours from ceilings, and structural supports give way in a way that feels more symbolic than realistic. At the same time, other characters appear to arrive there and move through the space, which supports the literal reading that it is real. The name choice and the exaggerated state of the house give this theory enough symbolic weight that it could be capturing something about how the narrator perceives that space, even if the film never confirms whether the house truly exists or not. Limited spread. There is a theory that the supposed nationwide spread of fight clubs and Project Mayhem is heavily exaggerated by the narrator, and that the movement may actually be much smaller than he believes. In the film, he claims there is a fight club in every major city, and Project Mayhem appears to have far-reaching influence, yet we only see a limited number of locations and members on screen. Fans note that these claims come from an unreliable narrator who is desperate to feel part of something bigger, which could lead him to overstate their reach. The way people recognize him and quote rules to him can be read as either real fame or his perception of being important. The plot still functions if the movement is only a regional phenomenon, and we never get neutral news reports confirming its true scale. That ambiguity means the theory that the clubs are fewer and less widespread than the narrator claims is possible without being nailed down as fact. So it might actually be true. Group salvation. Some fans propose that the early support groups the narrator attends are the only genuinely healthy part of his journey, and that Tyler's appearance is his mind violently rejecting the healing they offer. The theory points out that when he cries with strangers and admits fear, his insomnia goes away, and he finally feels some peace. Only when Marla disrupts this fragile honesty does he slip back into sleeplessness and eventually conjure Tyler. Under this reading, the groups represent authentic emotional vulnerability, while Tyler represents a flight into extreme performance and denial. The film shows support groups as somewhat absurd, but also oddly compassionate, and his temporary relief is clearly real. It never explicitly crowns them as the right path, or blames Tyler entirely on abandoning them. So this remains interpretive. Still, the timeline linking his relief to the groups, and his breakdown to losing them, gives the theory a credible backbone, making it something that might actually be true, even though it is not stated outright. By the way, if you are enjoying this run through the strangest Fight Club theories, I put out videos like this a lot. Subscribing would really help me keep making them. Meta Filmmaker. A widely discussed theory sees Tyler Durden as a meta stand-in for the director or editor, manipulating images and audiences inside the film, the same way a filmmaker does outside it. Tyler works as a projectionist, splicing single frames of explicit images into family movies, and he lectures directly about how cigarette burns and reel changes work. The film itself uses single-frame flashes of Tyler before his introduction, mimicking the exact trick he describes. Fans argue that this makes him a personification of the movie's own ability to control and corrupt what you see. Every time he appears with impossible timing, or breaks the rules of continuity, it feels like an editor making bold, invisible cuts. The story functions perfectly well if Tyler is only a psychological construct, and Fincher has never literally said, "Tyler is me." That keeps the theory in the realm of clever meta-analysis. The strong parallels between Tyler's job and the film's techniques give it enough support that it might actually be capturing a real intentional layer, even if it is not confirmed. Lou Distortion. A more niche theory suggests that Lou, the bar owner who tries to shut down Fight Club, is partly exaggerated or even partly imaginary, representing the narrator's fear of authority crashing into his secret world. The scene where Lou beats Tyler, gets blood spat in his face, and suddenly backs down plays like a heightened, almost cartoonish version of a confrontation. Fans argue that an average bar owner might call the police or throw the men out instead of being bullied so quickly by a bleeding stranger. Because we see this entirely from the narrator's point of view, the theory posits that he may have embellished or reshaped the memory into something more mythic and satisfying. There is no direct contradiction that proves Lou is unreal, and a tough owner backing down is not impossible. The extremity of the scene and the narrator's theatrical description give the idea just enough plausibility that it might actually be true, even though the film never states it. Assignment myth. Some fans think that the infamous homework assignments of Project Mayhem might not have happened exactly as described, and that the narrator is blending fantasies with isolated incidents. He recounts a series of escalating pranks and attacks, blowing up storefronts, vandalizing buildings, and staging car crashes. The theory notes that we seldom see the full consequences of these actions, like major news coverage or police investigations, which you would expect after multiple urban bombings. Instead, the tasks feel like a montage of chaotic images, more than a documented timeline. Supporters suggest that the narrator, under Tyler's influence, may have turned a few real stunts into a legend of constant, coordinated mayhem. The film keeps the perspective tight on him and never cuts to an objective report on these events, so it does not settle whether they all happened as described. That leaves space for this theory to be plausible and something that might actually be true, without ever being settled by the story. Symbolic buildings. A recurring theory argues that the collapsing credit card buildings at the end are symbolic rather than literal, representing the narrator's inner breakthrough instead of an actual terrorist act. Supporters point to the highly stylized look of the destruction, the perfect timing with the music, and the almost calm, intimate tone between the narrator and Marla as the skyline falls. Given his bullet wound, trauma, and history of hallucinations, it is not a stretch to imagine him picturing an ideal ending where he blows up his debts and starts over. In this reading, taking Marla's hand is the real action, and the explosions are his mind's way of visualizing letting go of the system that trapped him. The plot leading up to this moment treats the bombs as real, and there is nothing on screen that clearly labels the final shot as a fantasy. So both literal and metaphorical readings are still in play, and the film never resolves which one is true. That uncertainty keeps this theory on the table as something that might actually be true, but not officially confirmed. Death drive. A psychologically focused theory argues that Tyler Durden personifies the narrator's death drive, the unconscious wish to court danger and self-destruction, rather than just his rebellious streak. Tyler pushes the narrator into fights, car crashes, chemical burns, and terrorist plots, all under the guise of self-improvement. He mocks safety, comfort, and even the idea of living a long, secure life, claiming that only in losing everything are you truly free. The lye-burning scene on the kitchen table is often cited as a ritual of embracing pain and mortality, rather than turning away from it. Supporters of this theory see Project Mayhem not as a coherent political movement, but as a series of increasingly elaborate excuses to get closer to death, while calling it liberation. The text never uses psychoanalytic terms or labels Tyler in this way, and a simpler reading of him as pure anger and anti-consumerist rage works fine. Still, the pattern of choices and rhetoric he embodies lines up with the idea of a death drive strongly enough that this theory might actually be true on a thematic level, even if it stays unofficial. Hero Misread. A meta-level theory holds that the real twist of Fight Club is how easily audiences themselves fall into the trap of idolizing Tyler, proving the story's critique in real life. In this view, when viewers start quoting Tyler's speeches as genuine advice, starting real-life fight clubs, or putting his face on posters as a role model, they are reenacting the mistake the narrator makes in the first half of the film. The narrative arc clearly shows that Tyler's philosophy leads to cult-like behavior, loss of self, and near disaster, yet his charisma and cool aesthetic can make him seem aspirational. Fans who support this theory argue that the film is deliberately seductive, inviting you to be impressed by Tyler so that his downfall hits harder. The text never comes out and says, you should not emulate Tyler, and some viewers come away still wanting to. Because this theory is about audience reaction rather than on-screen facts, it can never be proven in a strict sense, but the documented history of people misinterpreting the movie makes it feel plausible enough that it might actually be true. Partial recovery. Some viewers argue that the narrator's apparent victory over Tyler at the end is only partial, and that he never truly regains full control of his mind. They point to his strangely calm demeanor after being shot, the almost too neat timing of the explosions, and his somewhat detached tone when speaking to Marla. Under this theory, shooting himself severs his connection to the most extreme version of Tyler, but leaves many of Tyler's attitudes and influences embedded in him. The final line to Marla, "You met me at a very strange time in my life," can be heard as a dark joke from someone who knows he is still not entirely stable. The film presents this moment as a kind of hopeful acceptance, and many viewers read it as a genuine step toward healing. The lack of an epilogue showing long-term recovery or continued relapse keeps the door open. Because we never see an objective assessment of his mental state after the credits roll, it remains an open question, and this theory might actually be true without being definitively proven. Mayhem Infiltration. Building on hints from the book and the film's tone, a theory suggests that Project Mayhem quietly infiltrates mainstream institutions rather than ending with the skyline collapse. In the novel, hospital orderlies treat the narrator like a leader whose mission they support, calling him Mr. Durden, and implying that the organization continues. Fans port this idea into the movie, imagining that some of the anonymous men in uniforms, offices, or police stations we see might secretly be former Fight Club members. The blank, robotic way certain authority figures behave, like the detective who shocks the narrator with his detailed knowledge of Project Mayhem's plans, fuels speculation that the group has already reached into official channels. The film does not explicitly reveal any character in power declaring loyalty to Tyler, and those scenes can be interpreted as simple, plot-driven tension. The similarities to the novel and the eerie behavior of some minor characters make this infiltration theory feel plausible enough that it might actually be true, even though it remains unverified on screen. Temporal Disorder. Some fans play with the movie's jagged sense of time and argue that the story is not presented in strict chronological order, especially around the apartment explosion and the formation of Fight Club. Under this theory, certain scenes with Tyler and the narrator may be flashbacks, fantasies, or misremembered events placed out of sequence by the narrator's damaged memory. For example, the airplane meeting, the nude beach story, and early flashes of Tyler could be quietly rearranged in his retelling. The film already opens in medias res, with a gun in his mouth and then a rewind through past events, which sets the expectation that time is not straightforward. Supporters argue that this allows for subtle time jumps that help obscure the twist. There is no official timeline chart from the filmmakers that confirms or denies this, and a linear reading works fine. The editing style and the narrator's admitted confusion give this theory enough support that it might actually be true, while still never being confirmed. If you found this worth your time, subscribe so you do not miss future uploads. Thanks for watching.